Hello everyone, this is Alex and welcome to the sixth part of my Titanic Paper Model Build. I am happy to bring you what I feel is a very special video for me today because after showing you the latest progress on the build of this model, I will also be announcing an array of projects that are coming to my channel in the near future, all towards the end of this video. But first, let's dive into the build, which will consist today mainly of two things: the base for the model, which was an unexpected addition, and completing all the fixtures and elements that populate the ship. So without further ado, let's get started. But quickly before I begin, let you know I am leaving a short review of this Titanic 3D puzzle as a bonus towards the end of this video. Alright, so for the base, I'll start by showing you the materials I'll be using, which are very few. The first one and most important one is this black 1/2 centimeter foam board that I really like because it's very sturdy and easy to work with. After that, we have this black cardstock that I might not be using because this was for covering the borders of the foam board, but the way I'm assembling the base, I might use the same foam cardboard side of the foam board to cover up that detail. And of course, I have the printing of the ocean with the water wakes as the ship goes by that I downloaded from the original creators file at the link that I always leave in the description of my videos. And also to remind everybody that this is a scaled up version of that file. That file is originally printed in a letter sized or A4 sheet of paper. As you can see here, this is double the size because my ship is double the scale. Also, I printed two different nameplates. Well, they're similar, the same thing, just different sizes because I still don't know which one will look best on the completed base. Alright, here I just wanted to show you that before doing anything, I did a quick draft of the design of this base with all the measurements, number of pieces, and the overall way I will be assembling this thing. I began by cutting down the large piece of foam board into the different pieces I will be needing. As for the assembly procedure, I use a method that covers the edge of the foam board and leaves a rather seamless finish. The first step is to carefully cut through the foam portion of the board while leaving just one remaining cardboard side that is beneath. Secondly, I will peel off the excess material, recutting and scraping with a knife if necessary until I get a clean finish. The new gap is the thickness of the foam board, so the joint piece would fit right in place, covering the foam edge. As for some corners, I would just cut a 45-degree angle with the help of my gridded mat. And there you go. Some other 45-degree angle cuts for the top pieces of the frame and ready to start assembly. But first, I like to prepare the pieces before gluing them together. Because the foam is very porous, it is best if I add a layer of glue that will seal the foam and leave a better contact surface for the glue to hold on. I will leave it an entire day to dry properly. Now that the pieces are ready, I continue to start gluing, using a generous amount and making sure it fills every little crook. I firmly press the pieces together and then gently press and close the seam. With all the four sides complete, I proceed to glue them by the corners and close up the frame of the base. Time to glue the print to the foam board, and for that I will be using this spray glue. I apply thoroughly to all the surface and carefully apply the print with a ruler. As you can see, the print is smaller than the foam board piece, which allows me to cut the margins off and have a clean fit between both elements. I apply some more pressure just to make sure I have a tight bond. Next, I bring back the assembled frame where I apply some glue to these two square cutouts on the bottom panel. The print piece will be glued to these points, allowing me to easily remove or place the base print into the frame. As for the final step of the label, I decided to cut out the smaller size piece. I painted the border with a black marker to remove the white lines of the edges, marked the center point on the frame, added some glue to the label, and the job is pretty much done. Alright, so now with the base finished, it's time to see how everything fits on together. And right here you can see that each element is independent from one another, so the actual base is independent from the frame, and I think that at least for now I won't be gluing the ship to the base because for any kind of changes or modifications I need to do in the future, well, that will come in handy. So let's see how it holds up for now, and let's start assembling this thing. And of course, the base is nothing without the ship, so it's time to put the ship on top. Alright, so there is one last surprise with this base, which is the transparent acrylic cover that I made for it. And like I said at the beginning, this was kind of an unexpected addition to the overall build, doing the base and everything else. Well, because of the direction this model was taking with so much detail, I decided it was best to find a way to preserve it the best I could, you know, protect it from the elements, dust, or anything that could happen to this model. So with this cover, I'm safe on that side, and well, I really think that it looks best without the cover, but it's nice to have now the options to protect it or display it without the transparent cover. Seeing the model on top of the ocean base really levels up the bar for presentation right here, I think, and helps create a very nice diorama of how the ship would have looked like crossing the ocean. And especially easy to do this with a waterline model like this one right here. Time to go back to my favorite part, which is making custom details. If you saw my last video, you are now familiar with this, but if not, I will quickly go through the process. First, I begin to cut stripes of different widths out of the thick paper sheet I use for the model. I cut these stripes into smaller lengths that are then glued and sandwiched together to form thick stripes of paper. I continue to cut down these new stripes into smaller squares, trapezoids, and other shapes depending on the element that I'm crafting. I kind of just eyeball my way through references from images online to approximate shape and size. Here I am painting the shape pieces in accordance to what I find to be the proper color scheme for the element if it isn't just white. In this case, I am working on the ship's winches using my green marker to paint the set that goes on the well deck and boat deck. Now, before gluing the pieces to their bases, I am pre-cutting them in order to make it easier for me to assemble them in a steady surface and then remove the pieces without much trouble from the sheet of paper. I can now begin gluing and assembling the tiny winches piece by piece, slowly giving shape to the small mechanical fixtures. I add some necessary final details to complete the basic shape and finish each element. Next, time to cut them out of the paper sheet. A rather easy process now, thanks to all that pre-cutting done earlier. I finish each piece by using the color marker again to cover all the remaining white edges and creases of the paper. I made two different types of green winches. On the left are the larger winches that go on the ship's well decks, and on the right, the smaller ones that are located on the boat deck. I will repeat the same process for the last set of winches located on the forecastle near the mast, which are considerably larger and more complex than the green ones. Once again, I shape out the different pieces out of some thick stripes and proceed to paint them with a marker. In this case, I chose a pure black color, which it will turn out to be a very poor decision shortly. Once again, I glue the painted pieces on the pre-cutted bases, remove them, and finish by detailing all the white edges. And here we are with all the completed sets of winches. We have the two sizes of green ones and two sets of large ones in gray and black. So like I mentioned about the black, I made a fitting test and realized it just looked too strong and saturated. I felt it jumped too much out of the color scheme, so I remade a complete set again and lowered the tone using a gray marker this time. I think it fits much better, as the sheer size of the winches already makes them stand out. Next up, I will continue preparing another batch of new custom details using similar methods as before. First, I began by updating the original printed anchor crane as it felt very thin and flimsy. I made the three sections out of thicker paper and glued them together to create a much sturdier and better looking crane. And for the compass tower, finally, I'm gonna use the original part number 43 here for the platform, but for number 42, which is the tower structure, I'm gonna be using the small thin stripes to build it from scratch, which will give it a much nicer look. So here I am cutting out the platform of the long-awaited compass tower. I pre-bended the scored edges before applying some glue and closing the shape together. But when I presented the finished piece, I did not felt convinced about it, so I decided to build my own version. First, I took the roof piece of a bridge wing house for the base, as I saw some reference that depicted a gray floor on the platform. I reduced the size, cutting all 4 borders, and added the white sides with a stripe of paper. Midway on that process, I decided to add the little compass element, made from a tiny thickened slice of paper colored with a brown pencil. I wouldn't want to have a compassless compass tower after all. And there you go. Note that the entrance opening on one side for both pieces is also custom. The original piece leaves you with a closed box on all sides. As for the tower structure, I began by cutting the most reasonably thin stripes from my thickest paper to make the strut elements as thin and as sturdy as possible. As you can see, I am using the original piece to shape and glue the sides together, and then I just pop them out carefully with my X-Acto knife. This is how it looks with all the sides put together, and here is the result of the completed compass tower all put together. Alright, so while I show you here a short sequence of me adding this pipe element behind the first funnel, I wanted to mention that all the work you will be seeing from this video onwards is completely custom work added over the original downloadable model. Last time I checked, it's still up and you can download it for free at curl.net. Link in the description below. Now, here are some of the smallest details I decided to craft from scratch. Very simple things. In this case, it's just 2 little paper squares colored brown and glued to each side of a very tiny slit of paper. Notice I placed the square shapes at an angle to try to suggest at least some roundness to the squares, as these aims to represent ordered telegraphs, the ones that are located at the aft bridge all the way back at the stern. I continue with a few more little details like the smaller anchors at the bow and stern, which I just cut out and paint with a gray marker. Lastly, I finished this batch of details with the well deck vents. I first roll a stripe of thick paper for the main shapes. I bring some dark red print from my sheets of custom details for the lower portion of the elements. They do not share the same shape, so for the vent at the front well deck, I am wrapping and gluing the print around the base of the cylinder. As for the vent at the back, I am rolling a small cylinder with the print, and then gluing it to the white top portion, which is thicker than the base, as you can probably see right here. I add some top details to the front vent by wrapping another thin stripe of paper, and here is the result of the finished well deck vents. Alright, so very quickly I just want to show you all the finished custom details that I have done so far. Right here we have the green set of winches that correspond to the well decks and the boat deck, and the 2 set of winches that I did for the bow, where I will only be using the gray set. On the other side I have details that are located on the bow, the vents that go on both well decks, the compass tower that's going on the boat deck, and finally some details on the poop deck, which mainly consists of the elements that go on the aft bridge. And right here I have some other random detail elements that represent control wheels and other mechanical elements, and including the new anchor crane that will go on the ship. Last thing I tried to do for this update was the wooden handrail of the bulkheads located on the boat deck, bridge, and exterior promenades, using my brown marker to color the top edges. But as you can see, it wasn't a very smart decision, as the paper ended up absorbing too much ink and making a huge mess. Now the model is ruined and the series is over. Thank you all for watching. Just kidding, at this point I already thought of a way to fix it, but I realized I could take advantage of the situation and make some more improvements to the bridge in general. At the end, I continued the job using a colored pencil, which helped achieve a rather good result. Alright, time for some announcements. Here in front of me are some of the projects I plan to work on in the coming months. from paper to plastic models and some Lego as well. I will start here. Continuing with the Titanic theme is this other Titanic paper model from Taschen. I will not be covering this model as a series because it's a side project I will be building with my father, but I will probably post some updates, review, or comparison later on. Let's jump to the plastic models. Right here I have my first Gundam model kit. I will give Gunpla a try. I plan to briefly cover the build and go as far as doing some panel lining and weathering. Following the plastic models and coming back to Titanic is this 2-in-1 kit by Revel. It includes 1:700 scale model of the ship, almost same scale as my current paper model, and it also includes a very small 1:1200 gift model, which is the one I will be focused on first. My plan is to use this model as practice and testing for things like colors and finishes in preparations for the bigger model. Lastly, there is some Lego content coming as well. I will be doing some custom mods to current kits I have, like my Lamborghini Countach or my Lego Architecture Paris Skyline if you're into that. And I have this set right here to talk about my Lego City project, which is in its first steps of planning, but I intend to show updates in the design, build, and process here in my channel as well. Okay, it's review time for this 440-piece Titanic 3D puzzle. I got this one at Amazon for about $30 US, and the finished model measures about 77 centimeters or 30 inches in length, and it is pretty sizable for a display. You can see it here in my bookshelf arrangement. And if I compare it to my paper model, well, there's no comparison size-wise. It completely dwarfs it. Plus, it is a full ship, unlike this one, which is a waterline model. On the downside, it lacks a lot of physical detail, but that is just by nature of the medium and material it is made of. They compensate this with what in my opinion is a very nice graphic design and good looking detail and weathering. It is not perfect and accurate with proportions because it needed to distort in order to fit the shapes of the puzzle. There are, although, a couple of things I think could have been done better. The first one is the inclusion of masts. At least if they had been made out of cardboard or some other material, I believe it's important to the overall silhouette of the ship. Secondly, I find the highlights and shadows that suggest the curving of the hull a bit awkward. The first half is okay, but the back has a strange highlight at the well deck. I think it does not make a good job of projecting the proper shape. Highlight should have continued towards the back and start disappearing into shadow around the well deck too. Either that or just leave the entire hull a continuous shade of black. In short, if you want an easy to put together and affordable model and do not mind the lack of physical detail, then this is an excellent item in my opinion. Okay, that was enough stuff for one video. I hope you liked the short review and found some interest in these new future projects as well. If you did, feel free to comment below if you're interested in any specific project, and if not, I just hope you enjoyed the model update. Next time I will fix and update some existing elements and aim to install the ship's masts. With nothing else to share with you, I wish you the best and have a great day. Goodbye!